Sarah Matthews gazed at the black object, suitcase in front of her, heart pounding against her ribcage. This was not. This navy blue luggage that she has worn out the sleek Samsonite was undoubtedly a member of the realization dawned on her through the eyes of another in the pandemonium. Similar to a wave of cold water of baggage claim at Chicago O'Hare, she had procured an international airport. Wrong suitcase, her own backpack containing everything she had painstakingly packed for this crucial work interview, was now probably halfway across the metropolis with a stranger mommy I'm famished 5-year-old Emma yanked at, her sleeve, her brown curls cascading into her tired eyes. It was already past 9 in the evening, and they had been traveling since early morning from their modest hometown in Missouri. Sarah's hands trembled as she took out her phone, checking her bank account balance. For the 100th time, $246.73. The inexpensive motel room had already cost her $89, and she needed to save enough for their return flight in 2 days. "Just a minute, darling," Sarah whispered, struggling to keep her voice steady. This interview at Preston and Brooks Publishing was her opportunity at a better life. Her opportunity to ultimately evolve beyond the struggling single mother existence she'd been living. Since Emma's father abandoned them 4 years ago, she had spent her last savings on this journey, believing that her experience as a freelance editor could eventually land her a secure position with benefits. Benefits that would include health insurance for Emma. The suitcase seemed to taunt her from its position on the weathered motel carpet. Sarah knelt beside it, scrutinizing the luggage tag. Alexander Crawford was written in elegant penmanship. Along with a Chicago phone number, her fingertips hesitated over her phone's keypad. What would she say? How could she explain that she had inadvertently taken a stranger's bag because she had been too preoccupied trying to prevent Emma from running off in the congested airport while managing their carry-on luggage? A knock on the motel room door made her startle. Emma, who had been playing with her plush rabbit on the bed, glanced up with wide eyes. "Miss Matthews," a male voice shouted from outside. "This is the front counter." Sarah approached the door, cautiously keeping the security chain in position. As she opened it, a notch, the motel clerk, a middle-aged male with salt and pepper hair, stood there clutching a paper bag. "Sorry to disturb you, but a gentleman called the motel inquiring about you." There was a mix-up with luggage at the airport. The attendant held up the paper bag. "He had supper delivered for you, and your daughter said he thought you might be trapped without dinner because of the situation." Sarah's mouth dropped open slightly. She closed the door, removed the chain, and reopened it completely. The paper bag's logo indicated it was from a nearby diner, and the wonderful scent of warm food wafted from it. Her stomach grumbled, reminding her that she and Emma had consumed nothing but airport snacks all day. He also left a message. The clerk continued, delivering her a folded note along with the luggage. Said, "He's got your suitcase and would like to schedule an exchange tomorrow morning. Seems like a lovely fellow." Stated he's staying at the Drake Hotel downtown. Sarah's palms shook slightly as she unfurled the note. The handwriting matched the luggage identification. "M. Matthews. I suppose we have each other's bags. I'm extremely sorry about the confusion, but please don't fret. I've taken the liberty of sending you and your daughter some dinner. I hope that's not too presumptuous. I'll be in meetings until 11 a.m. tomorrow, but I could meet you at the Drake Hotel foyer at noon to exchange our luggage. I understand you're probably on a F schedule, so I'm glad to have a car service bring you here. Kindly call or text me when you can. Alexander Crawford." The note included his phone number again, along with a PS. "I swear I haven't opened your suitcase." Sarah stood frozen in the threshold until Emma's voice broke through her thoughts. "Is that food, Mother? It smells so wonderful." Thanking the clerk, Sarah brought the sack inside and began unpacking its contents on the tiny motel table. 2 cheeseburgers, Francais fries, chicken nuggets, apple segments, and even 2 portions of chocolate cake. Emma's eyes brightened up at the feast before them as they ate. Sarah couldn't help but ponder about Alexander Crawford. The Drake Hotel was one of Chicago's most prestigious addresses, and the handwriting on the note spoke of education and refinement. She looked at his suitcase again, noticing details she had overlooked before: the subtle leather trim, the discreet designer logo. What did he consider when he arrived at his luxury hotel suite only to locate her bargain store? Clothes and meticulously pressed interview suit. Her phone felt weighty in her pocket. She needed to call him. It was the correct thing to do, but something made her hesitate. There was her interview at 2 p.m. Tomorrow, the culmination of months of applications and preparation. She had budgeted every minute of this vacation, and now this complications posed to derail everything. Emma's voice yanked her from her musings. Once again, "Can I have the cake now, Mommy, please?" Sarah beamed at her daughter, heart swelling with affection for this little girl who had been her motivation for pushing forward through all the hard periods. "Of course, sweetheart," but first she took out her phone and began typing a missive to Alexander Crawford, attempting to ignore the flutter in her stomach as she squeezed. "Send Mr. Crawford, thank you so much for the dinner. You really didn't have to do that noon. Tomorrow works for me. I appreciate the offer of a transportation service, but I can make my own journey there. I haven't opened your suitcase." Either Sarah Matthews. She laid her phone down and turned to get Emma's cake, but it buzzed almost immediately with a response. "Kindly call me Alex, and I insist on dispatching the car. Chicago traffic can be unpredictable. I'll have it bring you up at 11:30. Get some slumber." Sarah, as she settled Emma into bed. Later that night, Sarah's gaze kept drifting to the mysterious suitcase. What kind of individual sends dinner to a stranger and organizes car service for them? And why did his simple text message increase her pulse quicken? Tomorrow, she would meet Alexander Crawford and get her luggage back. Then she would go to her interview and ideally change their lives forever. But as she reclined in the darkness, listening to Emma's steady respiration, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that her existence had already begun to change the instant she picked up the incorrect suitcase. The next morning, Sarah woke up to discover Emma already viewing cartoons on the small motel TV. Her daughter's purity was a stark reminder of everything at risk. As she got Emma ready for the day, her mind kept gravitating to Alexander Crawford's suitcase, still undisturbed in the corner of the room. At precisely 11:20 a.m., her phone rang with a text. "The car is arriving early to prevent traffic." Driver's name is James. Sarah's heartbeat as she gathered their belongings. The sight that welcomed her outside the motel made her jaw plummet. A sleek, black Lincoln Continental with a uniformed chauffeur holding the back entrance open. "Miss Matthews." The driver grinned warmly. "Mr. Crawford arranged for me to transport Emma to the Children's Museum while you encounter him, if that's acceptable, all expenses covered. Of course, he thought it might make things simpler for your interview preparations." Sarah delayed, her protective instincts flaring. The motorist seemed to anticipate her concerns swiftly, producing his official chauffeur license and company credentials. "Mr. Crawford also said to show you this," he added, carrying up his phone with a text message evident. "James, kindly make sure Miss Matthews feels entirely comfortable with the arrangements. The museum has my corporate membership on file." After a thorough review of James's credentials and a call to the museum to corroborate the arrangements, Sarah discovered herself agreeing. Emma was bounding with excitement at the prospect of meeting a museum, and Sarah had to concede it would be simpler to handle the luggage exchange without having to observe her daughter. The drive to the Drake Hotel was an excursion into another realm as they passed through Chicago's magnificent metropolis. Sarah couldn't help but sense the gulf between her existence and Alexander Crawford's. The Drake stood like a citadel of luxury, its historic guise speaking of ancient money and privilege. In the hotel lobby, Sarah's fingers anxiously smoothed her simple dress, the only acceptable outfit she had in her carry-on bag. Her gaze scanned the opulent space, pondering which of the impeccably dressed gents might be Alexander Crawford. "Sarah Matthews." The voice emerged from behind her, deep and warm. She turned and found herself gazing up into the most striking pair of green irises she'd ever seen. Alexander Crawford was tall, perhaps in his late 30s, with dark hair interwoven with silver at the temples. His tailored suit probably cost more than her monthly rent, but his smile was unexpectedly delicate. "I'm Alex," he said, extending his hand. I'm so sorry about the cargo mix-up. I wish you and your daughter enjoyed dinner last night. Absolutely. Thank you. That was very kind. Sarah managed, attempting to disregard the flutter in her stomach when their palms touched. I have your suitcase here. Fantastic, shall we? He indicated toward a quiet corner of the lobby where 2 armchairs waited. I thought we might want to verify the contents. Before we separate ways, Sarah moved his suitcase over, acutely aware of his presence beside her. As they sat down, Alex glanced at her with an unexpected intensity. Before we open these, I should inform you something. When I discovered I had the wrong suitcase last night, I did attempt to open it, not to pry, but to discover identification. The lock was engaged, so I couldn't. Oh, Sarah said, her cheeks warming. I always secure my luggage when traveling, with Emma's belongings, force of habit, a decent one. He nodded. However, when I returned to my chamber later, I discovered my suitcase had popped open slightly during transit. I'm not positive if I didn't open it, Sarah interrupted rapidly. I wouldn't. Alex's expression softened. I believe you, but I suppose you might have seen something when it plummeted open, and I'd like to elucidate. Sarah's heart began to quicken as she remembered the moment from last night when she'd moved his suitcase and it had migrated, the corner falling open just enough to reveal heaps of something that had made her swiftly shut it again. Her hands trembling. The money, she murmured. I saw the money. Alex leaned forward, his voice low. $200. 0,000 in cash. And now you're wondering if I'm some type of criminal, aren't you? Sarah's mouth got dry. She glanced toward the lobby entryway, unexpectedly very aware of how isolated their corner was. Alex must have read her expression because he swiftly pulled out his phone and handed it to her. Please look at this email. It's from the Chicago Children's Hospital Foundation. I'm on their board. We're purchasing specialized supplies for the pediatric ward, but the usual transfer methods were intended to take too long. Sometimes wealth is the fastest method to save lives. Sarah's hands shook as she read the email correspondence. Official hospital letterhead, urgent requests for a ventilat system, and Alex's responses coordinating the purchase. When she glanced up, his green eyes were watching her attentively. I should have realized how it would appear, he said softly, a stranger with a suitcase filled of cash. But I think you comprehend something about doing whatever it requires to assist children, don't you? The depth of emotion in his voice made Sarah's ribcage constrict. Emma, she said, everything I do is for her. James told me how attentively you checked his credentials before allowing Emma go. To the museum, mother, you're a good mother, Sarah. And now I'm hopeful you'll trust me enough to assist you too. She stiffened. I don't need charity. Not charity. Alex shook his head. An opportunity. I did some investigation last night. You're interviewing at Preston and Brooks Publishing, aren't you? I know Catherine Preston. She's searching for an experienced editor for their new digital division, someone who understands both traditional editing and modern platforms, someone precisely like you. Sarah's breath caught. How did your resume slipped out of a folder in your suitcase? He acknowledged. I couldn't help but observe your remarkable freelance portfolio. I also couldn't help but note the past due bills slipped into the same folder. Sarah, let me make a call to Catherine not to get you the job. You'll do that on your own merit. But to make sure she understands exactly what she'd be gaining. Sarah sat in startled silence, tears threatening to escape in less than 24 hours. This father had fed her daughter arranged museum entertainment and now offered to help ensure their future, yet somehow it was the way he gazed at her, like she was someone worthy of all this and more, that completely undid her. Why, she finally whispered, why assist us? Alex's hand moved as if to reach for hers, then stopped because when I saw those invoices and then saw your resume, the late-night freelance labor, the steady climb, from local papers to major publishing websites, I recognized something. The resolve to create a better life, no matter the cost to yourself. It's what I saw in my own mother's eyes years ago. He halted, a shadow crossing his face. She raised me alone too. We didn't make it. She perished when I was 12. working 3 jobs to pay for my education. But you, Sarah, you are going to make it, and if I can assist make that road a little simpler, how could I not? Sarah sat in Catherine Preston's office, her heart thundering in her ribcage. The interview had been proceeding for 45 minutes, and she couldn't determine if the publisher's poker face was an A positive or bad portent. The morning light filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, projecting refined shadows across the mahogany desk between them. Catherine's office, with its wall of literary honors and framed first editions, spoke of ancient money and refined taste, much like the Drake Hotel, where she'd left Alex just hours ago. The elegant woman across the desk closed Sarah's portfolio with deliberate slowness and removed her reading spectacles, letting them dangle from a pearl chain around her neck. Her grey eyes examined Sarah with an intensity that made her want to squirm in her seat. "Your task is impressive," Catherine said eventually, her manicured fingertips drumming lightly on the portfolio's cover the way you managed the Thompson manuscripts. Digital adaptation was particularly noteworthy, but I'm intrigued about something. She paused, grasping for her phone. "Alexander Crawford called me this morning, which is intriguing considering he's never recommended anyone before, not once in the 15 years I've known him." "How precisely do you know him?" Sarah's digits twisted in her lap, distorting the fabric of her finest dress. "It's actually a rather strange tale. We met because of a mixed-up luggage at the airport." Catherine's precisely sculpted eyebrows rose as she reclined back in her leather chair, "and in less than 24 hours you impressed him enough to make him violate his own rule about business recommendations." She moved forward, her pearl necklace catching the radiance. "You should know that Alex stands on the board of several major company Compass. His word conveys significant weight in Chicago's commerce orbits. He specifically mentioned your understanding of both traditional editing and digital platforms, abilities we urgently need." Before Sarah could respond, Catherine's office door exploded open. A man in an expensive suit hurried in, his face suffused with urgency. His tie was slightly askew, signaling he'd run up the 15 floors rather than wait for the elevator. "Miss Preston, turn on the news. Now Channel 5. Catherine seized her remote and switched on the wall-mounted TV. The startling news banner made Sarah's blood run cold. "Breaking enormous charity fraud uncovered at Chicago Children's Hospital Foundation board members under investigation." The reporter's speech filled the room. "Sources claim that over $2 million designated for children's medical equipment has been diverted through a sophisticated stratagem involving board members. The FBI has confiscated documents and is interrogating several high-profile individuals affiliated to the foundation. Initial reports suggest the fraud may have been ongoing for several years, with funds being methodically diverted through numerous shell companies." Sarah's world tilted sideways as Alex's photo appeared on the screen alongside other board members. The caption beneath read, "Alexander Crawford, board treasurer, person of interest." The photo showed him at a charity gala, donning a tuxedo, and that same gentle gaze he'd given her in the hotel atrium. "Oh my God." Catherine whispered, her resolve cracking. She turned to Sarah, her expression hardening into granite. "Did you know about this? Is that why you're really here? Was this whole interview a plot?" "No." Sarah stood up so swiftly, her chair scraped against the hardwood floor. "I had no notion. He was trying to assist me." Her mind raced back to the cash in his suitcase. $200. 0000 for medical supplies, he said. But now M. Matthews. Catherine's intonation was pure ice. "I suppose we're done here. Security will escort you out." Sarah staggered out of the Preston and Brooks building into the brilliant afternoon sun, her vision blurring with weeping. The doorman, who had hailed her so warmly on arrival, now regarded her suspiciously as she passed. Her phone was erupting with notifications, news alerts about the scandal, a missing call from James the driver, and a series of progressively urgent text messages from Alex. "Sarah, it's not what it looks like. Kindly, let me elucidate. I know how this seems. Is Emma still at the museum? Let me make sure she's secure. There's more going on here than you realize." The mention of Emma sent a bolt of alarm through her. Sarah desperately dialed James's number, her hands shaking so badly she had to attempt twice. "Miss Matthews." James responded immediately, his usual professional tone tinged with concern. "Don't fret. Emma is fine. We departed the museum an hour ago when Mr. Crawford called, sounding odd. I've been doing this task for 20 years. I know when something's awry. We're waiting at the coffee establishment next to your motel. Emma's having steaming chocolate and drawing images Sarah nearly collapsed with. Relief leaning against a neighboring building for support. Thank you, James. I'll be there as quickly as I can. She was already running toward the L train terminal, her interview heels tapping against the pavement, when her phone buzzed again. Unknown number, Ms. Matthews. This is Agent Diana Chen with the FBI's White Crime Division. We need to communicate with you about Alexander Crawford and a suspicious currency transaction. Our sources indicate you may have information about certain foundation funds. Sarah ceased dead in her footsteps, her heart pounding in her throat. The pieces began falling into place. Alex's sudden interest in aiding her, the convenient timing of their luggage exchange, the cash had she been portrayed. Was she just a convenient cover narrative for moving stolen money? Her mind flashed back to his gentle gaze, his understanding words about solitary mothers, the way he'd arranged everything to make Emma comfortable. Had it all been calculated manipulation? Her phone rang with another text from Alex. Sarah, I know what this looks like, but the foundation is being targeted by someone on the inside. I was attempting to protect the assets before they could be seized. Kindly meet me at the Drake. I can prove everything. Agent Chen's voice removed through her spiral of emotions. Miss Matthews, are you there? We have agents who can meet you at your current location. Sarah took a deep inhale, squaring her shoulders. Yes, I'm here, and I need to tell you something about a suitcase. But as she began to explain, her phone pinged with one final message from Alex. The words made her veins freeze. Sarah, they're coming for the money, but they don't know about the true evidence. In the suitcase, the USB drive concealed in the lining contains everything. The genuine records, the transfer trails, the identities. Emma could be in danger if they suspect you know anything. Don't trust anyone who can't tell you. What occurred to my mother on June 15, 1998? Sarah's digit hovered over the phone, her pulse pounding against her ribcage. The date tickled something in her recollection, a detail from Alex's resume that had fallen out of her. Suitcase. His educational history showed a gap year commencing June 1998. He told her his mother perished when he was 12, working 3 jobs to pay for his education. The FBI agent was still waiting on the line. Emma was securely with James, and somewhere in Chicago, a suitcase contained either evidence of Alex's culpability or proof of his innocence. Sarah closed her eyes, knowing her next decision would alter everything. Agent Chen, she said, firmly holding her phone firmer. Before I tell you anything, I need you to verify something for me. What occurred to Alexander Crawford's mother on June 15, 1998? The agent pause lasted a bat too long. I don't see how that's relevant to our investigation. Miss Matthews, without another word. Sarah ended the call and began running toward the Drake Hotel. Sometimes she understood the biggest risk was not taking one at all. The Drake Hotel atrium was swarming with FBI investigators when Sarah arrived. Her heart fell, but she forced herself to stroll calmly past them, her palms steady. Despite her racing pulse, she checked Alex's suitcase meticulously before departing the motel. The USB drive was precisely where he said it would be, carefully secreted. In a concealed pocket within the lining, the exquisite marble floors echoed with hurried footfall as agents moved purposefully through the space. A youthful couple near the entrance murmured and pointed at the LW enforcement presence, their vacation plans obviously disrupted by the unexpected activity. Sarah captured fragments of their conversation about the hospital scandal as she made her way to the elevator bank. Her phone rang with a text from James, verifying that Emma was joyfully enjoying the Ferris wheel at Navy Pier. The further from this situation, the better. The elevator journey to the penthouse floor felt eternal. The thumb drive felt like it was scorching a hole in her pocketbook as she approached the presidential suite, where a solitary agent kept guard through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She could see ominous clouds gathering over Lake Michigan. Auspicious, an afternoon typhoon, ma'am. This area is restricted. The agent began his palm, moving instinctively to his weapon, but was interrupted by a familiar voice from inside. "Let her in, Johnson. She's the one we've been waiting for." Chen appeared in the doorway, gazing considerably less sheen than she'd heard on the phone. Her blazer was slightly creased, and there was a tightness around her irises that hadn't been there before. Behind her, Sarah could see Alex seated at a desk, his jacket off and sleeves pulled up, surrounded by laptops and documentation. Alex stood immediately relief. Permeating his features, two agents moved to obstruct his path, their stances rigid and professional. "You came. I wasn't positive you would sit down," Mr. Crawford, Agent Chen ordered sharply. Then turned to Sarah M. "Matthews, I hope. You're here to cooperate. We know about the money in the baggage. This would all go much easier if you tell us precisely what your involvement in this scheme was." Sarah took a deep inhalation, squaring her shoulders as she stepped into the suite. The room was dense with tension, and she could feel the weight of numerous eyes on her. "Actually, I'm here. About June 15th, 1998. She watched Agent Chen's face attentively note the almost imperceptible twitch at the corner of her lips. The day Maria Crawford perished. In a hit-and-run outside Chicago General Hospital, where she worked 3 jobs, the case was never solved, though witnesses reported seeing a black Lincoln Continental departing the scene. Alex's sharp intake of air was perceptible in the sudden silence of the room. Agent Chen's expression remained carefully neutral, but her fingertips tightened on the envelope. She was holding the same model of car. Sarah continued, her voice increasing stronger. "With each word that belongs to Raymond Chen. Your father, Advisor Chen, former board member of Chicago General, present superintendent of the Children's Hospital Foundation." Sarah reached into her purse, pulling out the USB drive and the fellow whose signature appears on all the fraudulent transfer documents documented in these files. The room erupted into chaos. Agent Chen rushed for the drive, but another agent elder with a federal marshal's badge moved quicker, catching her arm. "Diana Chen, you're under custody. For conspiracy and obstruction of justice, we've been watching you for months." As additional agents rushed in, Sarah eventually allowed herself to look at Alex. He was gazing at her with a mixture of astonishment and something deeper, more profound. The afternoon light flowing through the windows captured the silver in his hair, and for an instant, she saw the 12-year-old child who had lost his mother far too soon. "How did you figure it out?" he asked, gently moving closer as the agents escorted a protesting Diana Chen. "Away the resume that dropped out of my suitcase," she said, meeting his gaze. "It showed you took a sabbatical year after your mother's death. I checked up the newspaper archives on my phone on the way here. Your mother's death was suspicious, but the investigation was abruptly dropped. Then I saw Agent Chen's name in the text messages you showed me this morning about the hospital board, the same last name as the detective who terminated your mother's case." Alex ran a palm through his hair, his composure finally breaking. "I've devoted years tracking the corruption at Chicago General when it expanded to the Children's Foundation. I knew I had to act." Diana Chen was using her FBI position to defend her father, just like he'd covered up my mother's demise. The money in the suitcase was supposed to be traceable to lead them into committing a motion we could document. "And I was just in the right place at the perfect time?" Sarah asked, remembering the pandemonium at baggage claim, how different her existence had been just 24 hours ago. Alex's lips curved into a faint smile that made her heart skip. The suit exchange was genuine. "But when I saw your resume, your situation, it reminded me so much of my mother. I couldn't help but want to safeguard you and Emma. I just never expected you to end up safeguarding me." Instead, the federal marshal approached them looking somber but satisfied. "Mr. Crawford, we'll need your formal statement. Miss Matthews, yours as well." But first he beamed slightly, bringing out his phone. "I believe you have some unresolved business to attend." To Sarah blinked, puzzled, until she saw the text message he was showing them. It was from Catherine Preston. "Inform Sarah her interview slot is open at 4:00 p.m. and inform Alex he owes me dinner for not trusting me with the whole tale sooner. Catherine is an old friend." Alex clarified, his eyes sparkling with hope. "She's been helping me collect evidence for months. She knows everything. Now about the foundation, about my mother, about you. She's waiting to recommence your interview." He checked his timepiece, which provides us exactly 45 minutes for me, to take you to lunch and adequately invite you out on a real date. He took a stride closer, close enough that she could scent his cologne and see the flecks of gold in his green irises. That is, if you're willing to grant a guy. With a complicated past a chance, Sarah pondered about the past 24 hours. The anxiety, the confusion, the surprising instances of connection. She thought about the way Alex had cared for Emma's comfort, even in the midst of his own crisis. How he'd recognized her hardship as a single mother. How he'd fought for years to unearth the truth about his own mother's death. Well, she said, trying to hide her smile, I presume we do need to discuss what occurred to our genuine suitcases. The federal marshal cleared his throat about that we discovered them in Agent Chen's office. Evidently, she had them picked up from Lost and found as evidence. He indicated to the corner where both suitcases rested, though I believe the restaurant at the peninsula might be a better location to trade them. Alex offered his arm to Sarah. His expression softened into something tender and full of promise. What do you say? Set for another adventure. Sarah took his arm, feeling the solid warmth of him beneath her fingertips. Outside the hotel windows, the threatening tempest had passed, leaving behind a dazzling blue sky. Sometimes the biggest risks lead to the greatest rewards. Sometimes a simple error, like grabbing the incorrect suitcase, could change everything, you know, she said. As they stepped into the elevator, Emma always wished to learn how to play the cello. Alex's answering chuckle was warm and rich, filling the small space with joy. I suppose that can be arranged. After all, we've got a lot of lost time to make up for. As the elevator descended, Sarah leaned slightly into his shoulder, sensation for the first time in years, like she was precisely where she was supposed to be. Sometimes she understood home wasn't a place at all. Sometimes it was a person, sometimes it was a moment, and sometimes, just sometimes, it was as straightforward as was reaching for the incorrect suitcase at exactly the right moment.